Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we have the executive director from the Pennsylvania River Basin Commission. Why are these commissions important? But first, you're about to be counted, the census. Why is that important? As they say, let's get to it.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
All right, we have a number of important topics to take up with the folks from Pennsylvania Capital Star. Joining me to discuss those subjects is Stephen Caruso. He's a reporter with Pennsylvania Capital Star, and the editor-in-chief, John Micek. He's a frequent guest on the program. All right, John Micek, let's start with you.
Yes.
In about 90 days or so, we're all going to be counted. So why are we being counted? Why is that important?
It's the decennial census. Terry, as amazing as it seems, another decade has passed since the last time the federal government went out and counted everyone living in the United States. That's not every citizen, mind.
Important point.
An important distinction. The Trump administration, as we know, litigated that, trying to make it a citizens-only count. It's a count of every single person living in the country. Does everything from the determination of congressional districts to the driving out of federal funding. Tons of demographic information that gets gleaned from it as well. Household size, income, the whole thing.
Tells us a lot about who we are.
It does.
In demographic, quantitative terms, correct?
Yeah, it's a really detailed picture of the country, and in about 90 days' time, those questionnaires will start landing in people's mailboxes. Census takers will start showing up at people's front door to ask them questions. It's a big deal, and the one thing that matters for Pennsylvania is, as is the case in the last couple of decennial counts, the state is on track to lose another seat. In Congress. We don't know who's going to get the drop. We don't know which seat is going to be taken out. In the past, because the bleed has mostly been in the West. That's where we've seen it. That may well be the case again. It may be in rural Pennsylvania. We'll have to see. That's a big deal. The state right now has two people on the House Judiciary Committee. Some clout there, but it could be a diminution of the state's clout on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, and what's going on nationally is that the states that are more Republican than Democratic look like they're going to pick up seats, with California and New York, perhaps Illinois, losing seats while you've got Texas and Florida picking them up. So the bigger point here is the political consequences, as John points out, not just for Pennsylvania, but for the country in terms of the House delegations. We're talking about the State House of Representatives, the Federal House of Representatives, I should make, but it may end up affecting state legislatures as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, same thing's going to happen on the state level. And the same exact trend we've seen, west moving east, that's going to keep happening with the new census. You have state level redistricting that'll come as well. And on a lot of rankings, Pennsylvania's state house is just as gerrymandered as its districts for the federal offices were for Congress. And that kind of sometimes gets lost in the conversation. Is the state house is just as gerrymandered, just doesn't get as much kind of attention. We're going to see that also. We're going to see seats moving east. That will also help Democrats who haven't been able to break through in a majority this whole decade. Right.
The bottom line is that but if we do congressional redistricting in our state, it's done by state law, and right now we have the Republicans in control of the state Senate and state House, and we have a Democratic governor. So, translation: compromise has to be reached. No, yes, no?
Yes, and litigation, no doubt. These issues tend to end up in court as well. But yeah, I mean, if the General Assembly sends the governor a map he does not like, he has the power to veto that, of course. So one would think that there'd be some back and forth on that.
All right, let's go to another topic. We have two pension systems, one dealing with state employees and one dealing with school personnel, public schools, and the expenses of their staffs have been in the news.
Yeah, so we recently published a report at the Capital Star on how pension employees for the school teachers, PSERS, they have been going to Beverly Hills to check in on investments they made in this private equity company, Platinum Equity. So, these are costs. They're staying at a 5-star hotel in the Beverly Hills, too. It's called the Beverly Hills Hotel. People like George Harrison have stayed there. This is what Hotel California is from the Eagles song, that hotel. And pension employees everybody's been going there for these annual meetings of these private equity firms that have millions of dollars in state pensioners' money invested in them.
Right.
So the point of these meetings is the idea is you go there, you make sure you're not getting scammed, you make sure that all your money is well invested, you get pitched on new opportunities. Wow. But what it kind of goes back to is there's a high cost of doing business when it comes to private equity and other investments that a hedge fund, any of these groups that people have criticized, saying like, why are we putting our money into private equity is going to take our employees to California?
Your publication takes a shot at it. What's the response been?
We had a very vigorous back and forth with a representative of the private equity firm that was the subject of our reporting. Pretty widely shared on social media. Terry, the one thing that's important to note too is there's not complete transparency in these travel expenses either. So obviously what Stephen looked at, and he did all the reporting on this, is that the actual cost of staying there, these 5-star hotels that go for $700 a night, was not reflected in the actual travel receipts. So it's hard to tell how much these things actually cost the Pennsylvania taxpayer. Some of the costs were borne by the taxpayers, but that's the other issue here.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to take up the subject of legislative challenges, the mood of the electorate. We'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
All right, we have a couple of other important topics to deal with. The mood of the electorate, legislative challenges. It's a general topic, but John Micek's going to get specific.
I am? Good.
Yes, you are.
Thank you for letting me know. No, I mean, Terry, we're going to be, obviously, we're on the brink of the state legislature coming back in a couple of weeks. It's looking to be another very busy spring. Governor Tom Wolf will give his 6th budget address. A lot of issues on offer, school funding, the minimum wage. Yep. We'll be heading into the thick of a campaign season. All 203 seats in the state house, are up for re-election, as is half of the 50-member state Senate. Yeah, Congress is up. Of course, we have the small matter of the presidential election to contend with as well.
And the importance of our state in it.
And Pennsylvania, again, will be a key electoral battleground. We've seen some recent polling indicating that the mood of the electorate is souring, despite the fact that it's still a booming economy. Yep. Not everybody is sharing in that. We saw some wrong track data for the first time in I think it was a Morning Consult poll about a week or so back. So we have that kind of stew of things going on. It's going to be a fascinating spring.
All right, take it. What topics are you looking for?
Well, we kind of focus a lot on the State House. The thing I would point to is Democrats have been wanting to flip the Harrisburg, give Wolf some backing for a very long time. I'll be looking at, as the presidency is happening, if a Democrat wins, does that mean there are coattails? Does that mean Harrisburg flips blue for the first time since 2010? That's kind of one of the main things I'm watching. You're already seeing some senior Republicans start to retire down near Philly. They lost. Yeah.
Well, Obama carried the state twice, and it didn't change the state. In 2008 and 2012, it didn't change the 2010, the Republicans took over the state house. They've controlled the state Senate in Pennsylvania since before the American Revolution. I'm joking, but yet
it was just the Republican Revolution of '94.
Yeah, that's right. You have to go back, I think, to 1980, except for one short period of time.
Well, it's been a while, but that's been because Republicans have dominated the Philly suburbs, and that's been one of those rules of Republican politics. That you can count on those suburban voters. I mean, look at the 2019 elections. Democrats swept of everything near Philly is now blue, and that is worrying Republican operatives. I think for the odds on everything. From the presidency down to the state house.
Yeah, Stephen makes a great point about our state. Rural and small town Pennsylvania is Republican, urban Pennsylvania is Democratic, and for decades the decades, try more than a century, the suburbs were Republican, and there's a big change going on, particularly with college-educated women and millennials.
Well, I mean, we saw that come home to roost in 2018 in the
Correct.
midterms, Terry. Those college-educated women Republicans in the suburbs,
Many Republicans
who were just cheesed off with President Trump and voted with their feet. You've got all 4 congressional seats in suburban Philadelphia now who are
Right.
Democratic. Brian Fitzpatrick, the one Republican in Bucks County who's hanging on by the skin of his teeth, who's sort of a perfect Republican for that neck of the woods, but is still highly targeted. I mean, the trend lines are going more and more blue.
Yeah.
And I mean, Fitzpatrick's a very moderate Republican. That's what you see.
So hold on, we have 2 congressional districts that are going to be watched nationally.
Yep.
The first congressional district, basically Bucks County, Representative Brian Fitzpatrick, and then in the Susquehanna Valley, in a district, Northern York, Dauphin, and parts of Cumberland, represented by Scott Perry. Take it.
Yeah, I mean, you have Fitzpatrick, Scott Perry. Scott Perry's an interesting one because he's he's a member of the Freedom Caucus. He's a very conservative Republican in a district that's starting to change, especially with the new maps.
The Dauphin County part in particular.
Yeah, and even I think parts of Cumberland County that are close to Harrisburg,
good
these
point.
suburbs are, they're suburban now, and it's suburbs that used to just be consistently red, and watching people move out from Philly, watching those Philadelphia burbs expand, and
Right.
people moving into Harrisburg, moving into York, moving into Lancaster.
So
Yeah, I think
you get the
Cumberland's one of the
final
fastest
word.
growing counties in the state right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get the final word. 2020, the Republicans need to do something to shore up the suburbs. And they obviously got to get their base out. Their supporters in rural and small town PA, but these suburbs are become critical.
Oh, absolutely. And you saw that a couple of weeks ago when President Trump came through at the Giants Center. He was there to galvanize the base. You can bet that he's going to come back and back and back to make sure that those voters are energized, that core Republican base in Perry, in Cumberland, up that way.
All right, I want to thank you for coming in. All right, coming up, why are basins important? We have the executive director of the Susquehanna River Basin Commission on board, and he'll weigh in on that subject and more.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, my guest for this couple of segments of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is Andrew Dehoff. He's the executive director of the Susquehanna River Basin Commission. That's quite a title. And here's the importance. River basins themselves are very, very important for a whole variety of reasons. First of all, what's a river basin, and why are they important?
Thanks, Terry. River basin, also known as a watershed, is the land area that drains to a river. So think of a drop of rain falling onto the ground. It will flow into a small stream first, and then into a larger
Big
creek,
stream, yeah.
eventually a river. Right. So that land area is a river basin or watershed. Most people think of states, but watersheds are different, and our state boundaries do not follow watershed boundaries.
Okay, so what this directly means is that we've got to look at flooding, we got to look at the storage of drain water, droughts. Give us a sense about the specifics of what goes on when you get to the basin.
Sure. Water is essential to everything. It drives our industries, our power plants, agriculture. We use it for drinking water, obviously, recreation and tourism. So it's really important, particularly when you have a river like the Delaware River or the Susquehanna River or the Ohio River in Pennsylvania, where in some cases the river serves as a boundary between, say, New Jersey and Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that's
or
right.
in the Susquehanna, it starts in New York State.
and ends up
flows into Maryland. Right. So what happens in one state is important to other states, and they may have different interests. They may have different water quality standards.
Yeah, and I'm sure we have a lot of our viewers who fish, and so these are important areas for fishing.
Absolutely. We want to make sure that there's enough water in our streams and rivers to support fish and industries at the same time. So you need management mechanisms that allow for that to happen.
So in the state of Pennsylvania, you mentioned a couple. Do you know how many basins there are in the state?
There are 6 major basins: the Delaware, the Susquehanna, Potomac, Ohio, Genesee, and Allegheny.
So they're literally, we're talking about in various parts of the geography of the state.
Exactly.
Is there a size dimension to it? Are there smaller basins?
You can carve up, the Susquehanna Basin, for example, is part of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. But within the Susquehanna, you can carve up, the Swatara Creek, the Connedaguinet Creek. So it can be a few square miles to the Susquehanna Basin is the size of South Carolina, 27,000 square miles.
Wow. All right. So let's go to a couple specifics. Flooding.
Sure. Very important. The next flood is not a matter of if it's going to occur, but when it's going to occur. So we have a long history of flooding in Pennsylvania because of our terrain. You get heavy rainfalls associated with tropical storms or hurricanes. And when you combine that with land development and the way the water hits the ground and funnels into our streams.
And the land development seems to be more and more with the expansion. Exactly. Obviously, we need development, but you'll take it. We have to be very careful about the effect on streams and rivers and basins, correct?
That's very true, yeah, for any number of reasons. For one thing, the water as the rain flows from the land to the streams, it can pick up pollutants along the way. That's a major concern that a lot of people focus on. But other concerns are when it moves quickly into streams, it has a lot of energy and can erode. You'll see, driving by, you'll see stream banks that are encroaching into farm fields and structures. And then when you move water that quickly away from the landscape, it's not allowed to soak in and recharge our aquifers, which is also important for water supply.
Well, let's go to the opposite situation, a drought.
Exactly, right. So droughts are very interesting compared to floods. You know when a flood is happening and you know when it's over. Droughts, are we in a drought? When's it going to end?
And they're slower. Flooding, you got it a couple of days and it's there.
So it's really important to plan and to monitor conditions and to try to figure out, what happens when we are in that drought so that we can still operate our businesses and have drinking water and keep the fish alive.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're the executive director of a specific commission. Do all of these river basins have commissions, or just the larger ones?
It varies across the nation. Pennsylvania is a partner in several commissions. It really depends on the situation that was in place historically and what the needs were. We're
going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to talk about abandoned mine damage from that end up into the streams and rivers and obviously into the basins, and why that's important. And we'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
All right, Andrew Dehoff is my guest. He's the executive director of the Susquehanna River Basin Commission, and we're talking about river basins, their importance, their significance. And I want to go to another topic, and that is we're an old mining state, to be sure, and we still do a lot of mining. It's important to the economy. I'm not suggesting that it's negative, but there is an effect that it has on streams and rivers. And it's called abandoned mine damage, but the abandoned ones in particular. Take it.
Well, you're absolutely right. Pennsylvania coal fueled the Industrial Revolution, so it was very important. But when those mines shut down, the voids that were left by taking the coal out filled with water, and chemical reactions occur, and you have discharges that are acidic or have metals in. Poor water quality to the receiving streams. So we've had places in Pennsylvania that haven't supported aquatic life for a century or more.
Right.
So there are efforts that SRBC is partaking to reclaim those areas and put in treatment systems that sometimes result when they're working in seeing
Now,
naturally
does this get done
reproducing
by
trout.
the federal government, the state government, or both?
Both. There are funds collected by the federal government from coal operators that are still operating, and they distribute that money to the states to reclaim these sites.
All right, I'm going to give you a test.
Okay.
10 meaning the most, 0 meaning the least. The significance of it as a problem, most, least, what would you say?
It is absolutely a 10 in that local area because those
in
streams,
the area where the old mines have shut down.
Exactly, because those streams simply are unusable. They do not support life. They can't be used for drinking water. Now, those are usually smaller streams, and by the time they get to the larger rivers, that effect is diluted, so it isn't as important to the Susquehanna River, for example, but it's absolutely vital to that local area.
Now, does stormwater play a role in that, or is that a distinct, or is it an and/or?
Stormwater is more associated with urban areas, but they have the same effect of washing pollutants into the streams that...
So you get a huge amount of rain and it drains off and there are pollutants that get carried there?
Exactly.
What's the specific pollutants? Is there something that ought to be done about it? Go ahead.
Sure. The pollutants that the federal government is most interested in is sediment, dirt, silt, sand that gets into streams and chokes out aquatic life, but also things like phosphorus and nitrogen from agricultural fertilizer, from yard fertilizer, which is the fastest growing source of pollutants in the state, by the way.
Is that right? Say that again.
Yes. Yard fertilizers.
Yard fertilizer.
Yes.
Is that
fastest
people
growing?
growing?
Wanting the very greener lawn
And you
than their
can't
neighbor.
blame people for that. What the lawns and is that agricultural products grown in the backyard?
It's mainly lawns, yeah, right.
Yeah. So is that something that's, what success rate have you had in addressing it, and indeed in general around the state, because I know you follow that closely?
Yeah, it's a federal program run by the state, and there really is a heavy focus right now, so there has been some success. But a lot of communities are in the position where they're facing, how are they going to meet their requirements, and what will that take to do?
All right, before I let you go, overall planning, what's
vital. We want to make sure that we have sustainable water supplies to fuel our industries and economic development, so we have clean drinking water, but also to support recreation and tourism. So the commissions work cooperatively with the states to look long-term. What are our long-term needs? Where are the critical spots where we may run into shortages or conflicts, and think about how we overcome them.
There's another important question before I let you go that I want to ask, and it has to do with public support or lack thereof. What's this? Are you winning that battle to gain public support for what you do?
I think at the end of the day, people do realize the importance of water, particularly after a flood or a drought. But it's in between those times, it's a little more difficult to. People take water for granted, and that is a problem.
PR plan for that?
We do have responsibility for public education. We're currently looking at developing a new comprehensive plan that will involve public outreach and input from stakeholders. So yeah, we're definitely focused on hearing what the public thinks about what's important with water and implementing those ideas.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for the update, and you come back and keep us, if there's something that happens, because this is a truly important subject. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.